Good morning, Lee Summit Community. How are you?
Good morning.
Good. Every now and then, I'll go to the mailbox, and sometimes in the mailbox is a letter addressed to someone else. Does this ever happen to you? Maybe it's just the postman lady person is new, or maybe it's just the fact that I'm a new homeowner and the previous owners forgot to tell the people and update their address and all that stuff. But I don't know, I'm assuming I'm not the only one that this happens to. However, when I do get mail for someone else, I am very tempted to open said mail and discover more about a person I don't know. Oh, this one's from the IRS. Oh, let's find out what Sally's been up to. You know, that kind of thing. Now don't scoff like that. You've been tempted to do the same. You're not telling me you're that much better than me, right? Like, I'm not the only one that's been tempted to open somebody else's mail, right? Now, I've never done it. I wouldn't do that. You're not supposed to. But there are many, many people who have come before me, who are much wiser, much smarter than me, and they have all said something to the effect of reading the New Testament letters is an awful lot like reading someone else's mail. When you get to the New Testament, you get to the book of Romans, everything from there on is a letter. It's a letter to someone, written by someone, addressed to a specific group, a specific people. So whenever you begin to read the New Testament, you're in essence reading someone else's mail. You open up this personal letter written 2,000 years ago by people none of us have met, with a lot of questions surrounding the places, the context, the culture, all the stuff that's going on. And yet, the Bible is not written in a way for you and I to say, this is someone else's mail, let's put it back in the mailbox. Let's put it back on the shelf. It's actually written in a way that God has something to say to you and I in 2022, even though we're reading someone else's 2,000-year-old mail. But I find myself having to hold that in somewhat of a tension, a little bit of a balance, as I read the New Testament, understanding that this literature and these letters were ultimately intended for a completely different audience, yet alive and active and have a message for me 2,000 years later. But a very different audience, right? I mean, you get into the New Testament letters and there's nobody there that's being written to that would remind you of the Western American church. It's just written to a completely different group of people. And so today we are going to begin to unpack one of those letters. We only have one side of the conversation. We just have the reply from a man by the name of Paul. But he writes back to a young church in a city called Thessalonica, and it's a letter we refer to as 1 Thessalonians. And in this letter, over the next couple of months, as we just kind of pull this letter apart, we are going to discover in this particular letter some of Paul's most intimate writings. As Paul addresses in this letter a community of people that he loves dearly. And 1 Thessalonians reads and sounds different than all the other writings and letters from the Apostle Paul. And so what we're going to see together over the next 8 or 9 weeks is really what amounts to this idea that 1 Thessalonians is really Paul's love letter to the church. And by default in that letter, Paul also has a love letter for us. And today, we're going to begin to unpack 1 Thessalonians. Before we start, let's pause, have a word of prayer, and then we'll dig in.